Reich will take over as interim head coach at Stanford this season and only this season. Let's talk about what that means and what college football has become, which pro football light. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. We talk college football year round, so if that's something that you are into, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like this video, leave me a comment below. Tell me, do you think that Stanford did a good job in hiring former NFL head coach, offensive coordinator, great quarterback, Frank Reich, to be their interim head coach for exactly 1 year? I can think of this happening once before at Arkansas and his 8-month contract. And it's fun at the time because I don't want to be here that long. Y'all don't want me here that long. It's a bridge. I can think of this also happening, now that I think about it, twice at Baylor, right? The bridge between Art Briles and what became Matt Rule, and it working for the most part in both cases, right? Brett Bielema tends to have kind of a checkered history at Arkansas, but in the end, I think it went well. I think it was fine. I'm also very interested to find out how the staff is going to get filled out around Reich with this already known, but we do know that offensive coordinator was hired, or I should say promoted, in Nate Byam, who was their tight ends coach. He's going to be calling plays now. For those of y'all that need a refresher, because I'm sure you know who Frank Reich is, great quarterback at Maryland. At one point, he brought Maryland back from a 31-0 deficit at halftime against Miami to win 42-40. And that, at the time, was the biggest comeback in college football history. Really good quarterback and became a really good coach. Players coach, a lot of people like playing for him. And his real claim to fame is the Philadelphia Eagles win as offensive coordinator when, turned Carson Wentz into an MVP caliber player. He just didn't win the damn thing. And then Nick Foles ends up winning them the Super Bowl that year over the New England Patriots. Score of that game was 41-33, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more about that because one of the first things you do when you get a new head coach like this is check the schedule. And I can tell you from checking the schedule, Stanford travels to North Carolina to play, a classic ACC matchup of cross-country rivals, which features Frank Reich and the New England Patriots, the Philadelphia Eagles, and Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots, now college football. Two former head coaches at a high level, two great minds in football coming to college football. That is how healthy the sport is. Frank Reich is 63 years old. Didn't really have a great go of it as a head coach. 41-43-1 as a head coach, and it really didn't go well once he got to the Carolina Panthers. They start 1-10. It goes off the deep end. He became the first head coach since the merger in 1970 to be fired in back-to-back seasons after being dismissed from the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, this pick was made by Andrew Luck, etc. Andrew Luck being general manager of Stanford and really having the biggest things to say, having the biggest role at Stanford in their football program and what it will be going forward, from name, image, and likeness to recruiting to head coaches. So much so that when Troy Taylor got into trouble for harassment and bullying, talking to people like you can't talk to people, and it made it into the pages of ESPN, digital pages of ESPN website, in a really great story that Dan Welzel did. They pulled the trigger. Like, they decided, okay, we can't have Troy Taylor around any longer. So rather than see him through this year, they fired him. And rather than try to go hire a permanent head coach, they have been given the opportunity to take their time and wait for the hiring cycle to come back around with Frank Reich, knowing he's only going to do this for 1 year. It's difficult to recruit around that, too. It's going to be difficult for players to play around that. They already lost a really great player to the transfer portal. And Stanford isn't one of the programs that tends to slack on other parts of your character or academic resume so they can get you to play football. This has been Notre Dame's claim to fame for many years, meaning you go there, it's really difficult to go to school and play football, but they have built an apparatus that supports such a thing. So if you've already proven you can get in academically, they have all of the resources not only available to you, but mandatory to you to make sure that you don't tarnish that part of the reputation. Because when you go to Notre Dame or you are coaching Notre Dame, school's bigger than you are in every respect. There's no way in which, for instance, Deion Sanders shows up to Notre Dame and Notre Dame changes up its whole steez. You can do that at Colorado, where they don't really have an identity that they need to stick to, and it is moldable to the head coach, which is what we're also used to. Alabama became Nick Saban. Oklahoma became Bob Stoops. Texas became Mac Brown, has become Steve Sarkisian. Kirby Smart, Georgia, it takes on their persona. Stanford and Notre Dame stand apart. That's why Jim Harbaugh being able to win there is such a big deal. David Shaw being able to win there is such a big deal. And why it's a difficult job. You got to really want it, right down to director of football as opposed to the head coach, because that is the identity. Again, I think this is a remarkable play for Stanford, and I think it's a remarkable play for Andrew Luck, who obviously wanted this challenge and was enjoying his retirement, but also looked around and said, I have something to add here, and I think I could be good at it. Many people that talk about Andrew Luck would tell you he could do anything else he wanted to do. As a matter of fact, I tend to believe that Andrew Luck is one of the few men that have played in the past 15, 20 years that you want to have a cup of coffee with or a beer, and you'll probably come out better for it. I don't get to say that about a lot of quarterbacks, particularly years after they stop playing. Usually there's something about them that really gets under our skin. The only thing I could say about Andrew Luck, though, is that he went to Stanford, which was founded by Leland Stanford. And if you know anything about Leland Stanford, you know something about Robert Behrens. You know something about Robert Behrens. You know something about the state of California. We don't need to go into it, but you should know that I know what kind of private school Stanford is. And usually, if it's got somebody's name in the front of it, how did they get their name? What does that mean to you? Back to football here. Now Frank's got to fill out the staff. Now Frank's got to convince the players that this is a worthwhile transition year in 2025. And they're all going to have to deal with what we think is revenue sharing come July 1. We expect to get that news very soon. Matter of fact, maybe in a week or so, we will find out for sure that the House settlement is going through and that on July 1, everybody will be capped at $20.5 million to spend on their entire athletic department, where many of us believe 75% of that is probably going to go to football only. And then a lot of that's left will go to men's basketball, and then you're going to have NIL collectives fill this thing out, either to keep you in line with Title IX, keep you in line with the revenue sharing agreement, or simply to go get the next Haley Van Lith or Livy Dunn or superstar Caitlin Clark, superstar athlete that plays on an Olympic sport that doesn't necessarily revenue generate. Why am I listing women? Because those are the ones that we watch the most. But if you have Wyatt Hendricks at Oklahoma State or Gable Stevenson at Minnesota, yeah, you're going to make those concessions as well. It's about superstardom and power. That's also where we are in football. Frank Reich got this job in large part because he's asked, I'm sure. Bill Belichick gets paid Deion Sanders money without Deion Sanders' accolades in college football because he's Bill Belichick. I mean, thinking about $10 million head coaches, that used to not be a thing. Now, it's not only that it used to not be a thing, and then it became a thing when you had shown you won a national championship. Jimbo Fisher comes to mind when I think about that, right? Ryan Day, $12.5 million. Steve Sarkisian, not quite, but should be close. Lincoln Riley was first for me to go, huh? Mike Norvell in there as well. But now, if your star power demands it and you can show that you are benefiting all the boats and all the boats are rising with you as the tide, you get to take a piece of that too. And that's revenue sharing like you read about. If you have that much to say about prospective students that don't play football coming to school or alumni getting back involved with their donations, they're going to pay you that way. Stanford is going to need all of that too, but they can get it. That's the thing. You don't need a bunch of people at Stanford. You just need a few. When you look at their legacy, you look at the men and women who have graduated from there and what kind of earning they get, all you got to do is show them a little bit of winning. You show them a little bit of winning, you're back in Christian McCaffrey's, you're back in Bryce Love's, you're back in Alec Ian Manners down the line, right? You're back to Andrew Luck's, Toby Gerhardt's. And I think that's where they're going to go. And I think this is a safe play. It's a smart play if the roster can fill out and if you don't look embarrassing in 2025. And I don't think that they will. But with an interim as your head coach, it's a difficult sell. Let me know what you think in the comments below.